Welcome back to Bounce Forward with me, Tiff Hall. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this podcast, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present. Today I'm joined by Brooke Turner. Brooke is a renowned expert and educator in the health and fitness industry, specialising in functional fitness for females with over 15 years of experience. She is on a mission to educate and empower women and exercise professionals working with women on effective and enjoyable exercise throughout their lifelong athletic journey. Brooke, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm so excited to be speaking with you today. I wanted to start with pelvic floor dysfunction. Can you tell us the basics? What is it?
Essentially, often we don't hear about pelvic floor dysfunction, or we don't actually take an interest in it until maybe we navigate pregnancy and motherhood ourselves. But it's really important to understand that it's something that isn't exclusive to women who have carried a pregnancy or who are in their motherhood postpartum journey. And it's also not an old lady thing. So pelvic floor dysfunction can be something that, like a all-encompassing term for anything from urinary stress incontinence, fecal or flatulence incontinence, and pelvic organ prolapse, hypertonic pelvic floor, anything to do with the pelvic floor, essentially.
Yeah, wow. How did you navigate pelvic floor dysfunction yourself? You've got 3 children, you've had 3 pregnancies. How did that go for you?
Yeah, so I think being an exercise professional like yourself, Tiff, it's something that I was very acutely aware of all the, the right things I should be doing during pregnancy, given my, qualifications and knowledge and experience. And so for me, I have had 3 really positive pregnancies and 3 really amazing labours and deliveries. But with my first born, my son, I actually ticked a lot of risk factors for things that can actually predispose women to having prolapse or pelvic floor dysfunction. So for me, things like a long pushing stage, a large baby, tearing, things like that, they're all sort of risk factors that when coaches should be screening women, asking these sort of questions, I ticked a lot of those boxes. So I developed a mild prolapse after my first child, and I navigated that really well with the help of a pelvic floor physio and following my programs and things to a place where I was still moving in a way that I enjoyed and I really, really identified as being myself. Second time around pregnancy, I wasn't too symptomatic with my prolapse, which was great, but I did have that fear factor around how am I going to recover from this and will I be able to still do the things that I love? And again, I put in the hard work after I'd had that baby. My first birth wasn't traumatic. It was actually a really positive experience, but I experienced birth trauma. So I had an internal tear, which is, it's not like you pull a hamstring and you feel that muscle go. It's identified through that internal assessment through a urogynecologist or a physio. So, and I'd always wanted to have 3 kids. I carried pregnancies really well. But my pelvic floor dysfunction was a real determining factor around how will I mentally be able to cope if I have this third baby, this third pregnancy, this third postnatal journey, and I then can't perform high impact exercise. I can't lift loads. I can't play sport. I can't move my body in a way that
you want to. And you've got 2 children to look after as well. It's like, it's huge, isn't it?
Yeah. And for me, I exercise for my mental health. That's the number one reason why I move my body. Obviously, there's other great things that come from being physically active. So I was actually really fearful during that third pregnancy and that third postpartum recovery as well. But he'll be 3 very soon. So almost 3 years down the track now, I'm at a point where I'm so glad I did. So if any women are listening and they have prolapse or pelvic floor dysfunction to some degree, and you're thinking, how will my body hold up carrying another pregnancy, or can I actually get through that? You absolutely can. You just need to make sure that you've got the right support to help get you there.
So talking about returning to exercise, what are your best recommendations for women getting back into exercise after having a baby?
I think like the biggest thing, and you yourself, having navigated that twice as well, my mantra, I think the more you go through it and the older you get, the wiser we become. We realise that it's not a race and we don't have to compare ourselves to others or be doing something by a particular time. Like even this whole 9 months in, 9 months out is a load of crap.
Yes. I got to 9 months and I was nowhere near ready or back or, feeling strong again. And I thought there was something wrong with me.
Absolutely. So I think we just need to remove that pressure. And a lot of the pressure we feel to look or be moving a certain way, both during our pregnancy and then in that postpartum journey, is a lot of it's actually just self-imposed. And again, being in the fitness industry, maybe we felt we needed to look a certain way or carry a certain way.
True.
So I think just having that mantra of mine has always been, I have forever to find my fitness.
I love that.
So, even though you want to get to that gym class or do your rehab work or whatever it is, and you haven't slept well or you've been living off soggy cereal and toast crusts, which don't count as, healthy, balanced, round meals, but is the reality that a lot of mums are actually living off. It's that being kind to ourselves, but making sure that we build a really strong base first before we try and rush back into the way we actually want to be moving our bodies. Because pregnancy and, even that first 12 months postpartum, it can feel like a long time, but it's a relatively short season in, what we want to be our lifelong athletic journey. Like we want to be moving when we're 60 and 70.
Yeah. And so where do you start, Brooke? Like you've had a baby, you've passed your 6-week check, you're desperate to move again. Where do you start?
Yeah. Following a program, working with a women's health physio. But if you're working with a coach or a trainer, you have to make sure that they're pre- and postnatal certified.
Thank you.
The standard PT certifications or a 2-day CrossFit Level 1 course or your Les Mills gel certifications, they don't even scratch the surface on this stuff. So for any coaches that are listening, and if you don't think it's important to level up in this area, if you work with women, then you're doing them a disservice by not doing so. And if you're a woman listening and you go to a gym or you have a PT or follow, one of his programs, we need to make sure that we're working with people who are suitably trained, because we need to rebuild from the inside out. Like childbirth, whether it's vaginal or C-section, it's major trauma to the body. And if we were to go, and I know that you've had plenty of surgeries and injuries, Tiff, we often get this rehab plan and we get to go home and follow it and work with really great musculoskeletal experts to make sure that we have really good outcomes. And we do that rehab. So I call them like my less sexy but essential exercises. And so we could actually do them soon after we've had the baby. We don't have to wait till this 6-week mark to actually be, moving our body, but we just have to retrain, obviously, what we would consider a workout and go, okay, we're not going to get our heart rate up. We're not going to break a sweat, but we are performing those less sexy but essential exercises to re-engage and build, our transverse abdominis, our obliques, our rectus abdominis, our pelvic floor. And it can be boring. And for me, I've only ever really enjoyed Pilates when I've gone through pregnancy and my early postnatal journey. And some people love that. And that's what makes us all amazing and unique and individual.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the key thing, is working with somebody who's qualified or, a reputable program, and just not rushing the process.
And it's so true what you say. Everything, like I've had wrist injuries, knee injuries, you get a plan from your physio and you have that support. But you have your baby and the doctor's like, bye. And you're just like, what do I do?
Yeah. And with your injuries, you probably get to a point where like now it becomes like prehabilitative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you know that you need to do your stretches or your mobility or whatever it is so that you then don't experience that soreness or inflammation or restricted, movement through that joint. And it's the same with like pelvic health. So for me, having navigated prolapse, when a woman is symptomatic, and I'm speaking from experience, and like the stats for prolapse are about 50% of all women at some stage in their life will experience some degree of prolapse. So a physio will do an internal assessment, that's the gold standard, and they'll grade that. But when someone is symptomatic, like it is all consuming, it's all you think about. You lack confidence in your body, you feel at loss of the way that you used to be able to train. And as someone who identified as, pushing the most weight or finishing first or running the fastest, quite highly competitive. And I consider myself to be a life athlete, which if you train every day or a few times a week, then you absolutely are. But when things aren't giving you grief, like for me, if I'm not symptomatic and I haven't been for a long time now, you don't do the prehab. So, and then all of a sudden, if you have shoulder injury, you might be like, oh, why is my shoulder hurting? It's like, oh, well, I haven't been doing those stretches that I was supposed to be doing or the, strength building exercises. And so then it becomes rehab again. So we need to just keep it in for life, essentially, because even once we're 3 years into motherhood, as women, we then get to experience, peri and postmenopausal and that hormonal shift, and we're at risk of all of these things again.
Thanks so much for listening to Bounce Forward. I love having your company, so DM me all of your questions at tipphall_XO and let me know what questions you need me to cover. Don't forget to rate and review me on your podcast app. Speak soon. Happy days.